So thank you all for joining us during this RECAS seminar. And I want to thank most of all Professor Erik Champion from Adelaide University of Australia for joining us at the evening to discuss video games. As we have discussed during our RECAS time, game studies in Eastern European are not really a developed still academic field, and I think this will be a great booster for all of the colleagues that are still on the verge of joining this academic field to maybe even pursue it a bit more. I would invite Erik to share a bit about himself and how did he get so deeply into video game studies, and it's a great opportunity to host this speaker because not only me, but also other colleagues from this call cite your work most often when we find ourselves in certain dead ends. So please take the floor.
No, thank you. Um, okay, so I have a long list of slides here which parallel potential political, social, and other aspects one can use and develop and share games. And they're all mostly very low tech. But you asked me a very specific question, how did I get into games? I started when I was about 14 years old. In the early 1980s, we had a programmable scientific calculator, and I learned to program on them. And I was actually before then, when I was about 8 years old, we had in the 1970s a game called Pong, which is like a small white beam that went across the screen, and you had to have a bat on either side. And I was fascinated by why it was fascinating. I was fascinated not so much by the game design, but why people love playing games, even if they're simple and even if they're frustrating. And I did not expect to be involved with games later on. I went into architecture and philosophy and other fields. But when I did a PhD, um, when I was supposed to be looking at VR, I found that the most successful virtual reality systems were games. So, okay, that's the next slide. So, on the one hand, my students often look at VR and infrastructures and complex things. And if you're interested in that aspect of virtual heritage, which some people have described as virtual reality meets cultural heritage, this book, the Blue Book, is free in the middle there. When I asked younger people, well, younger than me anyway, how they were using photogrammetry, game design, semantic web maps, etc., to communicate heritage. And that's what I'm particularly interested in, is sharing the knowledge beyond academic papers. But we also look at tools and technologies and why they die and how we can best use them. So on the bottom left, 8 years ago, when I was UNESCO chair, we looked at, for example, VR headsets and how you would use virtual reality, which was getting cheaper, and why it often failed. And all these headsets, I think all of them were almost obsolete within 2 years. So it's a particular problem where you have museums who want to use new technology and communicate to audiences, and yet the technology doesn't work anymore. So it was almost to me like virtual heritage was an oxymoron, which means a contradiction in terms. So it's supposed to preserve and communicate heritage and community and similar ideas, but it can't even preserve itself. So that's a contradiction. Um, and yet also we have this really interesting view of computers. So this is Cardinal Powell, who left Australia in a cloud potential scandal, went to Italy and became, I think, third up in the Vatican. He's blessing the computers there, and I'm not sure why. But we find something mysterious about computers, and there are many good and bad things about them. But I've become much more, and I've been using computers longer than many people, much more aware that we're not really using them very effectively for us. So I might talk briefly about AI if you want. But what most of my research has been about culturally significant presence. So people think you can use virtual reality, to record what's there and show people what's there, and it will be very impressive and beautiful and fast. But I actually think we can show people what other people think of culture and why it's different to the way we think. And there's an analogy to politics there. Rather than just say, here's A to B to C, you can say, here's A to C to B. This is what's important to other people. So you can get an understanding that their understanding is different. So I think this concept of virtual reality, um, this notion that virtual reality should copy reality, is kind of misleading. And virtual reality itself was actually originally a theater term. It wasn't digital. And when I started 25 years ago, so this is a very long answer to your question. 25 years ago, one of the few games that I saw of culture, which was kind of cultural, was this Renaissance game. The inventors, I'm not sure. I think they're an Italian studio with EU funding. You go around and you ask the painters and the architects and the designers and the philosophers in this virtual simulation of Florence 300, 400 years ago. And you have to work out what things are and what they mean, and you get points or fame, etc. So in this case, you're interviewing Leonardo and asking him to explain what parts of the painting mean. And at the end of this, you go into a room where you're supposed to meet other people. So it's cultural in the sense of you can share your understanding. I never saw a person. I've spoken to many people. They don't even know about this original web-based game. But I think this is an aspect of culture which gets missing, which is how do we share and how we talk about it, how we discuss. And what I'm trying to do with my research is move beyond creating a game, solving the heritage questions, solving the heritage decisions, and keeping them open and fragmented and asking the public to solve them. Because I think we learn more from designing the game than playing it. Does that make sense? And heritage is an open, fragmented thing, just like politics is. So that's kind of where I started. Does that give you a good beginning answer to your question?
It does, it does, it really does, and it lines up with like everything that I personally stand in the whole surrounding of heritage and video games, and especially the part of the digital heritage really dying because we don't know how to take care of digital formats, basically, which is a structural procedure that every institution that handles that kind of data basically should follow. It's not even that difficult, if you ask me.
Yes, I got into trouble a few years ago because I was asked to be an invited speaker to the South Korean New Heritage Framework, and they had an ontology. They said that would explain all the South Korean heritage data to the public. And on my talk, I said, couldn't we have an experience where people debate what the ontology should be? And this person who was, I don't think the government, but an academic said, that's a terrible idea. And I think I might be wrong, but it seems to me ontology, what is a thing? How does it connect to other things? Is something we should discuss. Why should the government or a single person or an organization design how things interrelate and what their definition is? So that's a good question for debate. So we need a framework, but perhaps we also need input. And one example I can give, which isn't supposed to be political, but I think is, it's on the Wikipedia. It's called Nongapedia. So the Noongar people in Western Australia, they didn't know how to use the Wikipedia to make their own web pages. They had not written their own language down. A writer, a very famous Noongar writer, got a grant and worked with MediaWiki, and the people would come in and they would debate what the words mean and how to write them down. And then they actually made their own MediaWiki pages, and they were taught to do this by the Wikipedia Foundation. So they learn technical skills, but they also have a platform where they can debate. So to me, that's much more living heritage than just um, taking a photograph of something and giving it a term.
I really do agree with that on you in the sense that people who live and belong with the heritage in their surroundings should be those who essentially decide how we are gonna shape the digital places where their heritage is gonna be introduced to others and be kept as digital heritage for their own community as well.
Yes. On the other hand, there are countries which have stolen or conquered possessions, but preserved them better than if they had stayed in their own country. So it's a very, very difficult subject, isn't it? Um, so I think my research, I try and provide the questions, and I do not have the answers. But ideally, digital technology, rather than just preserving it, which an academic Sadar called museumization, which he said, I think it's a he, said is a westernization of culture. I actually think museums are wider and more generous than that, but there is a political part to them. And I think, was it in Bosnia or somewhere, where people created a virtual museum protest where a museum was locked up and they actually took down their heads, I think it was, they had phones of what the collection was inside. You would probably know about this better than I. It was about 10, 15 years ago. So in a way, they created a virtual museum exhibit outside the closed museum. Um, and I have also spoken to archaeologists who worked in Iraq when it was being attacked from inside and outside, and they had to weld the doors shut so the artifacts were not looted. And I also had a Brazilian architect in my game design class, and he came up with this. It was a game jam, really, a workshop. He came up with this idea when the National Museum in Brazil was burnt down. He developed a simulation game, the idea for it. There's a huge fire. You're in this museum. It's going to be burnt down, destroyed forever. You can save three items. What do you save? So he was a professor. He went to the government. He asked for funding, and they said it's too political. It's a really interesting issue, isn't it? Where you suddenly have to go, well, what do I value, or what should the culture value, and what should I save, given I can only save so much? And it's kind of a parable for digital heritage because we will never scan everything. And if we do scan everything, it's still not the real thing, is it? So there are all these philosophical questions which you could use for VR, for games, and so forth. So I'm trying to explore a bit more the open-ended solutions where the public come up with the solutions themselves, because I think that's probably where the more meaningful learning comes from.
So thank you for your wonderful answer. I do want to continue on this to ask you, what is your perception of video games, of open video games and worlds like Minecraft and Roblox, in that sense of people having their own agency to develop certain kind of heritage, but also politically activate together. So how do you see now the shift basically in the gaming industry within like a closed loop of gaming where you have the big corporation that sets the game setting fully, that like narrows the abilities you can have in exploring the game, and on the other hand, these worlds
Mm.
that are more free to explore and to build in?
That's a really good question. I have a couple of slides which can answer this, so forgive me if I'm scrolling across, but one of the first ones I did is when I was doing my PhD was enrolled with Second Life. And Second Life, you could edit things, you could sell things, people made their money off real estate. And this is from about 20 years ago. And Linden Labs, the company, was going to build all these wonderful new things. And I think it kind of failed because it didn't have meaningful co-creation and the company controlled it from above. So my PhD was in a rival virtual world called Adobe Atmosphere. So it was a 3D online virtual worlds that you could create and you could share your avatar across different worlds. And I think that was actually a better definition of the metaverse. So the metaverse, and my understanding was different companies and different platforms and different devices could create these like micro worlds, these micro universes, but you could move across them. It's an interesting question for culture. So it's almost like the visitor is a nomadic person in a sense, but you're not constrained by one platform or a device. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to mention them. Meta, Facebook, they create they have the most successful virtual reality headset market, but there's articles recently on the billions of dollars they spent on virtual worlds and why they're such a failure. I'll see if I can show a photo here. And one of the people behind one of the biggest game engines has said, oh, sorry, you don't need to see that. Um, I can only scroll slide by slide, so I don't talk about them directly. This is on the top right hand side. This is Mark Zuckerberg, and I think his X account, his Twitter account, he had the Eiffel Tower, and I think it was the Taj Mahal, and his idea of a virtual world, and it completely failed. Um, I think. And yet, other people have said Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite are the virtual worlds. They are the metaverse because they have that huge number of people and there is creativity in them. Fortnite, for example, some people think of it as just a shooter game, but I think it also has pop concerts, and people have made cultural heritage tours inside or using Fortnite. Minecraft, we've had students, librarians create virtual libraries to teach library skills. People have used programming. There's a political analogy where you could import in Minecraft the blocks to symbolize each square meter of a country. So you can build up a virtual Minecraft world of the Earth. And you're not allowed to move things around, but someone took explosives on a train from somewhere else and blew up Denmark. So there's that sort of political issue with control. Um, we're not using Minecraft at the moment. I think Leiden University, the archaeology department teaches Assyrian Middle Eastern archaeology through Minecraft with children. Um, I have some Minecraft projects here where you don't actually have a joystick, you use your body and the camera does everything, and you can actually create your own gestures as well as changing the Minecraft world. So it's extremely powerful. There was a VR version of Minecraft, etc. And I think the ingenuity of children learning Minecraft was amazing. For an architect, the resolution is pretty horrifying. It's not good. But when you look at 3-year-olds learn how to design and edit without reading anything beforehand, the interface was incredibly intuitive. Um, what was the other one I was going to mention? Roblox. I have a PhD student I'm meeting again next week who has created Roblox in Saudi Arabia heritage sites. I'll just see if I can find it. So there's a lot of projects, and they're probably not all relevant to you. Um, she's right at the end. Oh, this is it. So Allah is Saudi Arabian on a Saudi Arabian scholarship, and she used Roblox with a designer to actually recreate cultural rituals inside a heritage site and see what the children think with their parents and their teachers, because there's many esports games in Saudi Arabia, but cultural heritage games are, I think it's a low base at the moment. And Roblox has a huge number of people, and it's a huge amount of activity, and so many of them are children. And yet, in September, I think it was, her country, and I think Australia, many countries around the world nearly banned Roblox. So on the one hand, you have millions of people using it. On the other hand, these huge open universes or multiverses, they don't necessarily protect the children very well unless there's pressure on them. So there is always a balance between creativity, corporate control, corporate money, and the government worried about what's happening inside these virtual worlds. So I asked her about this, and Roblox is very easy to build. The editor, I think I've got a picture of it. Um, the editor is Oh, I missed the picture. There it is. The editor is quite good you can create your own prototypes and avatars and so forth, but it has these philosophical and political issues as well. So what we've been trying to do lately, this is another PhD student of mine who's finishing. She worked with the local history trust, our state's history trust, for 1 day a week, and she worked with curators because they run 4 museums, and she was going to build a digital game, but it's all about gamification for collections for museum curators who don't use games. No programming, no major design skills. And when she went out to the schools that the museums work with, all the teachers said, whatever game you build, we have to be able to print it. So there's nothing digital. So they worked on printable board games for children. In this case, it's actually a very complex Australian Aboriginal ecosystem of the relationship between climate, the seasons, the animals, the way in which humans survive, etc., and the mythology. And say 10-year-old children make the decisions about where they should go and what it means, etc. So this is, I think it's going to be developed into a proper game, but again, it's completely non-digital. And as I said before, I think the decision making of the players, when they have agency, when they have to make the hard decisions, that is perhaps more meaningful than a really powerful, shiny, high resolution game. But it is still a game, if that makes sense. So yes, her whole PhD is looking at how can the theory of simple game design be communicated to museum people, and how can they then work with the community to build games for them? Does that make sense? So it's a political process. Do you want to ask me another question? Because I have a lot of slides.
I can ask you another question if it's
Yeah.
easier. So I would also, so everything that we have discussed in the sense of video games and heritage is political, as heritage is political in the world we live in, and it has been political from basically the time that it has started in institutionalizing. And I do also want to share and reflect on the last PhD you shared with us, because sometimes, depending on the situation, choosing between digital game and board game has a really big difference in the implementation of such game, especially if it's wanted to be educational game primarily in the school setting. I think in both Poland and Serbia, we have had cases where board games have had much more success with both students and professors than maybe we would have with developing big budgeted uh, digital games. So I would like you to maybe reflect a bit more. How do you see basically video games and people having agents in video games, creating more civic skills, more participation and political agency within those who play?
I, I I think in the early days, computer technology was quite limited, and they deliberately used the limitations in computer games to stop you thinking about other things in the future. So the very first 3D game that I can think of, Doom, it was a very simple environment. You go around, shoot monsters, but you go round and round and round again. So they deliberately made confusing elements so you don't realize you're repeating the same space again and again. And I have a slide at the start, but I don't want to scroll and make people sick, which explains this very the visual nature of VR and also computer games and multimedia cinema. And we've had multimedia cinema since at least 1950s, 1960s, with wind and aroma and things like that. But how we share amongst each other, rather than just how does it look on a screen or how does it respond to a button, I think that is actually almost too difficult. And yet, if you think about it, the museums and the libraries and the civic spaces are also theatre. I mean, there's this whole potential for performance amongst ourselves, but the political issue with that is then the people take control. Um, and so I think I was distracting myself. I think your question is about how do games add to the civic process? Was that the question?
Yes, yes.
Well, I think one small element of video games, which I didn't quite discuss, which I will scroll back to very quickly, um, is empathy and how you can work with other people. So, in this case, this is an escape room in a museum, but almost everything is physical. So you have physical puzzles and you work together in a team to solve these physical puzzles you can see on the bottom right. And only when you solve these problems do you go to the computer and it gives you the answer and the feedback in the next stage. So I think, um, as you said, students and professors often like board games. We like seeing tactile things. We like holding them. We like being able to reposition them. And we also love this notion of ritual and the audience being involved in some way. Unfortunately, with most computer games, you're either playing or you're not. No, I don't directly have a game showing how spectators can be involved in the play, but I do have a game showing how the senses and your body can be more involved in a game, and it's not a heritage game. Oh, I think I've gone the wrong way. Well, no, I've gone the right way. So this is actually a biofeedback game, a simple meditation device that you put on your fingers. The game itself was you calm down when you look at these moving balls, and it works on your heartbeat and your sweat, basically, galvanic skin response, which is a difference in electric charge across your skin depending on the conductance. So it's basically a simple lie detector, but used for biofeedback. We modified this to change the shaders so you could see through things. You could change the color, the appearance, the rendering. You could change the music. In our case, we only had time to, it was the honors project, and this is 20 years ago. We only had time to demo it and evaluate people. Um, but if I see if this video works, um, forget that it's a violent game. The idea was to modify it for heritage. So when you calm down in a temple, you can see things, for example. The shaders, the creatures, the music, the screen shakes. The most important thing we found was actually the music changing. So it's actually working off how calm you are, how excited you are. Um, but there's the ability to use these sensors to change the environment for everyone. So if you're in a multiplayer environment, you can imagine a heritage environment when only everyone comes down, do things happen. So you can use the sensors as an audience. Um, and there's another example which might sound a bit crazy. Um, this one, it's actually a video on the right. Sorry, the display's in the way maybe. Um, so this is two people, one using an expensive VR headset, the other person using, and it's more obvious on the bottom right, a camera, a Leap camera. So it's about €50. It tracks your hands. That's all it does. You can buy them very cheaply, connect them to your PC. In this case, the woman has put it, she's a French student, an intern. She put it in her bandana, so it fits on your head. And one person is controlling the hands of an avatar, and the other person is controlling the legs of the same virtual avatar body. And they don't necessarily realize it to start with. So you can imagine there could be games where you learn that you have to share the body with someone else, or the body becomes the village, and you have to do group decisions together for it to work. That's just an analogy. Or perhaps people see things a different way, or maybe this is to understand how a person with a disability sees their environment. My colleague, Dr. Susie Emery designed a game which is free online called Life Resounding, and it's about living in experiencing a classroom as a neurodivergent student. So it's a free game. It's just explaining how the sounds and the colors of a game and of real life can be quite disturbing to, say, an autistic person, etc., or someone with ADHD. So we can use games to convey the experience to each other as well. And another way, and this I think could be used politically as well. Another example is mixed reality. My mouse has gone crazy. Let me try. So this is an earlier project. It's a PhD. Um, my student Murphy, he could extract, here we go. He could extract data from historical journals and turn them into 3D maps. So when you get closer to the map, the digital map on the floor, it turns into a 3D model. So it's using a mixed reality headset. You see the real world, but then with a headset, you can have these 3D objects appear in front of you. On the left-hand side was a demo. We could have a simple ship, which is digital, while we're outside, and it actually looks like it's floating on the sea in Fremantle. But the idea was with mixed reality, and so this is actually a mixed reality puzzle where you have to put the pieces of a ship together in the museum. Um, I've got too much sound here. So this is him setting up the mixed reality interface. The thing is, if I have a headset on and you have a headset on in a museum, we see the same real world, but we see these mixed reality objects or 3D models, and we do not realize the other person could see a different thing. So in this case, for this ship, has the oldest existing steam engine they've found that they could work again. It sank off Australia from Scotland in the 19th century, over 150 years ago. The museum managed to make the steam engine, or the engine in the ship, work after 30 years. It took them 30 years to make it work again. And all the pieces are across the museum of the ship. Now, in the mixed reality, you can move the ship across the journey. You can see objects appear over the objects on the walls, and you can move them, you can edit them, and you can work with another person to have something like a game. But the interesting thing here is that the ship was in Aboriginal art, and they saw the ship as something completely different. They'd never seen a ship before. It's in their rock art. So you could do this journey as an Aboriginal person, seeing, oh, this is a ship part. Oh, this is an object. I've seen it over here with my elders in this rock. And then you see someone else exploring the ship journey, but they don't see what you're seeing. So you can use mixed reality to have different interpretations or different views over the same physical environment. Can you see the opportunities here? And so you actually have to communicate to see what each other is seeing. So I think that's another way we can use virtual reality. So it gets back to when I said virtual reality is often seen as copying the real thing. Well, I could add in other things. I've been talking to a friend about doing ghost tours, for example, but not having ghosts in a normal way, or having a ghost AI which plays a game in a historical setting. So there is a game which we hope to play. She's got called, I think it's called Alice is Missing, and it's I think there's a board game version of it, and unusually the players all text each other. There's no talking in this tabletop role-playing game. And I thought this would be great for a ghost story. We're in different aspects of our haunted house. You don't see each other, but you're playing the game on your phone. And then one of the characters, one of the players, you don't know. It could be an AI. It could be a ghost. So there's all these opportunities for this technology. Um, so I think using our different senses, so one of the reasons actors did not like virtual reality to start with was they couldn't feel each other's body heat, right? There are so many things we don't see, body language, etc., indirectly that we could put into these experiences, or we could allow people to add those physical components. So I honestly think that's part of a civic space. And one of my personal crusades, I say it's a crusade, but I've done nothing about it, is how we have all these amazing public spaces where people do not perform and move together anymore. So example, the library, the theater, the art gallery, civic spaces are meant to be experienced together. And hopefully the interaction is not one way from a lectern above. It can actually be indirect as well amongst people. So for example, imagine you're in a movie theater, and it's going to be a multi-narrative, and the audience can decide which story. Now, normally in these multimedia theaters, it's simply a button, and at certain stage you say option A or option B. But imagine, depending on the volume of the audience, how much they move in their chair or how much they talk to each other, that actually determines which story it will play next or what character arc it will use. So we can do these things as well. And I think games can also more encourage reflectiveness and understanding of the consequences of one's actions. So these things I showed before, you begin to be aware of the other player and how your consequences affect them. And I'd like to see more of that in games, particularly for cultural heritage. So it's in tilt-factor games, it's in serious games and reflective games. But when we use games for heritage and potentially for politics, I think that we could use more of this as well. Sorry, that was a long, long answer. Do you have
No, it
another
was
question? Yeah.
I do. We have talked quite a lot about the positive aspects of
Mm.
gaming and political activism through gaming and heritage, but I think it would also be for me it would be nice to hear what do you think about the how to call this not so humane use of video games. And since we know that military from USA, military from Israel, also military from some other European countries, thank you, Ida, for lightening that part to me, like even small countries like Slovenia have basically military actions within video games to turn young people over to more military achievements and goals. So I would like to ask you, how do you see the bad part of gaming, if I can call it like that?
Well, I don't know if it's a bad example because it was arguably the most successful educational game of its time, America's Army. My understanding from someone who played it was it was really a marketing game to find out who was good at different roles in the army, and then it would try to enlist them, offer them the opportunity. So it's quite clever on the one hand. I think the researchers got 100 million US to develop it, so it was with academics. And the armies around the world do more than just kill people and defend. They do coastal and other things. There's many good things about the army. But one of the issues about games, and Ian Bogus talks about it indirectly in procedural games is you can get trapped in doing a procedure again and again and not thinking about it. And I think some of the more successful games allow you to do that. You go in with the normal way you do things, and the game keeps giving you positive feedback, badges, merit, levels, stages. But the really good games suddenly go, I'm going to change it. And it makes you think, I've just adopted this habit. It's become my character, and I've never really thought about it and the consequences. There is a game, I don't know if it's a game, it's kind of a game video where I think it was Ecuador. You see this person being chased by, I think, some sort of secret government squad, and most people associate directly with that person running away. I think it's a young woman. It looks like it's a journalist being attacked by the government. And then it splits the screen, and then you're playing a typical video game where you're trying to shoot down these bad people. And as you keep playing the game, and it keeps changing between the photorealistic, well, the actual film of the person escaping, and you in a tank looking down on something, you begin to realize that you are the government chasing that person. Another game is September 12. I don't know if you've seen that. It got taken off the web, but was by Water Cooler Games. September 12 is they say it's not a game, it's a simulation. It looks like a game. And you have this missile, and there are all these people in an isometric town. You're looking down on them, these sort of cartoon characters. And your mission is obviously to kill the terrorists, but not the innocent people. But the timing between you clicking the missile button and the missile landing is about 4 or 5 seconds. And by the time the missile lands, it can kill a terrorist, but it often kills an innocent person, and then their families gather around them. Then those people around the innocent people killed become terrorists, and you begin to realize you can never win this game. So I suspect quite strongly it was a satire, a parody, or it was a comment on America's idea that you can just keep killing people and everyone will love you afterwards. The implication is probably most accurate today. But but yes, a philosophy tutor once said to me, we often have similar values, but we rate them differently. And I came across this when I heard about someone who wanted to create a game about, I think it was 11th century Islamic debating circles. So apparently in the Middle Ages, in a part of the Islamic world, there was a university or an area where they actually had, in a way, debate games about scripture, about Islamic tenets. So often today people think there is no such thing, but apparently in this century there was this big almost philosophical school debating to understand better, and this person who was, I think, an Islamic scholar wanted to recreate that game, a digital game of the actual human gameplay, and I would like to see more of those things. So the other example I might came up with, which I don't know if you can find, is called Escape from Woomera. It's a free game. It's about 20 years ago, and it uses the early Unreal, and most of the characters are zombie-like. Woomera is Woomera. It was an asylum seeker camp in Australia. The Australian government gave money to this university. They developed the game. The developers did not give their names. The government found out that it was a critique of the asylum camp and tried to shut them down. So only I think recently did the game developers say their names. But anyway, you're in this asylum camp that where migrants or attempted asylum seekers are put away from people in basically the desert or the outback, and you have to find the right people to speak to so you can escape because you're not supposed to be there. But they use the limitations of early game technology. So almost everyone you meet is almost like a zombie, and it's really quite devastating. So they're not like zombies, but they're very low interaction and animation. And that was yeah, dramatic retelling of how you lose spirit in these places. So people can live there for years and years, and their children can be put there or taken away from their parents. So I don't want to talk about asylum policy in Australia because it's very contentious and I don't know the right answer. But when you play this game, you begin to feel what it is actually like to be these people with no hope. So I would say that would be another example. There's also a game, and it's not called. I'll get in trouble because I knew you'd ask me something like this, and I was going to find this game. I don't know if you can find it now, and I always get the name wrong because the name is very much like McDonald's.
Okay.
It's not McDonald's. It just happens to be you're in this factory, a fast food company, which sounds like McDonald's, and you spend all day making these hamburgers, and you see all the process of the animals going all the way through. And it's not McDonald's, but it sounds very much like McDonald's. And once you play this game, I don't think you look at a hamburger the same way again, basically. So yes, games can take these procedures, show us the non-public part to these procedures, and make us question why we follow them. Um, for people who eat meat, it can be very sobering, for example, to try and work out how many cows and chickens there are in the world compared to lions and giraffes. So if you guessed how many chickens and cows are in the world, and then you guessed how many other mammals there are, it is actually really scary. But very few people do this. So we've created the world as a giant farm, and we go to zoos and we see these animals and go, isn't that nice? But they almost don't exist in the real world. So in a way, we've created a virtual paradise, a little micro world of what it's like out there when it doesn't exist. So yes, games can expose that, and it's the consequences of our action. So in games, using the magic circle idea, you can role play different ideas and see what happens. I mean, we learn through failure in games, but for example, if you have a game where you're learning how to build nuclear power, it's okay if you fail. If you have a real job learning how to build nuclear power, it's not okay to fail. So I think games are very powerful for that as well. And for politics, for example, I don't have a photo on my slides, but we had a game workshop once where one game designer, he actually wanted to build an anti-colonial game. So you have this force who are the colonial power, and there's another force which opposes them, and through the gameplay, one learns how not to repeat the sins or the stereotypes of the colonial powers. But as we played his game demo, he admitted to us it was too much fun playing the colonial powers. And so I think there's many opportunities to come up with other game solutions to such things. But it's really interesting say the Hollywood stereotypes, why do they work and how do we get around them? I think we can start looking at that in games as a creative challenge, for example. Sorry, another long answer.
No, it's absolutely okay. Can I ask you maybe one final question before I
Yes.
give the audience the chance to ask their questions? So, as a part of this whole fellowship, I was trying to give recommendations to different kind of policymakers and the researchers and game development. So, I would maybe be interested, what would you recommend to developers? What would your recommendation to game developers would be in the sense of developing more game worlds that you have described during our past 45 minutes?
Um, I think actually game developers could I mean, in academia, we have prizes and awards for serious, meaningful games, but maybe we need more in the industry to promote games which have meaningful impact, etc. And there are some, but maybe not in every region. And maybe the big ones should promote other regions as well, which don't have enough money. And maybe there should be ones which promote free open software. For example, Blender is I think, one of the most successful digital humanities projects ever. It's free now. It was a commercial product. You can do 3D modeling, Gaussian splats, videos, etc. It won a BAFTA for a digital film, I think, last year. So it's becoming quite good software. But an AI company, Anthropic, is now going to fund it. Um, so there's all these questions to be had about software, but maybe we could promote the use and the ability of these free games, be it Godot, be it Play Canvas, all these technologies which are free. Maybe we could promote where they've actually created something meaningful beyond just being free. For governments, I think also maybe there should, in the bigger countries or the better funded game industries, there should be something trying to link the usefulness of games for thinking rather than just how much like Hollywood they are, if that makes sense. So perhaps between the education people, the the government policymakers and the game industry, they could work together better. This is a very small example, but I once had a workshop where I invited the people with free data, like the state government, the Geographical Society, an environmental company, the archives, etc. And I said, we're over 12 hours, we're going to have a game jam. Tell us all your free data and how you'd like to see it used or what it could be used for, or just tell them it's open to anything. And then in 12 hours or 24 hours, come back and be the judge of this game. Um, and the one that was judged the award winner was actually using, it wasn't really a game. It was using data of traffic and it plays music in your car, classical music. And the classical music is based on how much traffic there is between you and your destination. So it's almost like a musical GPS of traffic jams. But there were other ones as well, which looked at using reusable materials. Um, we've also done some environmental games, which I've just written a book chapter about. Um, and maybe even just teaching or educating people who play games about the environmental waste of their equipment. So, for example, at the moment, there is a huge issue with data centers that many of the ones around the world planned for AI are placed in the regions which have very little water and they need a lot of water. And so we have these debates that we should talk about. Um, and maybe also government should look at countries where the policy has worked and failed. I think Tencent 5 years ago, which owns shares in the biggest video companies in the world, they were a huge company, and then suddenly China said school children can only play games X hours a week. And so how the Tencent rebounded from that would be interesting to look at. So what the government, the Chinese government actually saw games suddenly as a bad social thing. So I think it's changed in China, but I haven't followed it. Um, but yes, maybe more research on where games allow creativity, design thinking, sharing, communication, reflection, etc. I think in Australia as well, we could build that into the curriculum much better. For the museum sector of, say, heritage trusts or people who run historic homes, one thing that has actually really worked on a purely practical basis is live action role playing. So I think in Poland and other places, they have castles where they do like, it's not Harry Potter, but it's like Harry Potter role playing. And I think that's brilliant because otherwise these houses and castles are not used at night, are they? So maybe we need to be a bit more ambitious and creative in the multi-use of these heritage places. Sorry, another long answer.
No, no, I really liked your closing on a role play because I personally do Roman role play and Roman reenactment uh, during for the past couple of years. So
Yeah.
I would maybe now like to offer to our guest if there are any questions. Thank you, Anastas, and see you next week.
Thank you. See you.
So, Erik, I want to thank you once again for devoting your time and discussing these things with us. I hope we do stay in contact and that there is a possibility for collaboration between video game studies of Australia and Southern Eastern Europe.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Okay. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Goodbye.